The sun has left and forgotten.
Your stories don't define you, but how you tell them will. I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker at Elkins Consulting. One thing that is very clear to me as a workplace communication trainer, a professional storyteller, and musician and podcast host is that when we share stories, we can change the perceptions of the people around us. And with me today is a guest that is already using that tool in very big and important ways for our communities. And I can't wait for you to get to hear Sarah Degn's stories. We met at the Montana Farmers Union Women's Conference a few years ago when I did a workshop on storytelling. And when I reached out to her via Instagram after seeing her visit to Washington, D.C. on behalf of the Montana farmers, I asked her how she was doing, and she said she is still using the tools that I shared at that workshop probably 3 or 4 years ago. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about using stories to get our points across.
Yes, and I think the time is ripe right now because it's not necessarily about convincing somebody. It's about helping them recognize a different point of view and to encourage them to connect and share their own stories. Mm-hmm. So, Sarah, we'll start the way that I love to start these conversations by asking you to share something with us that most people might not know about you. And I do this because I love to hear something that changes the conversation, turns it in a different direction than where we anticipate going, because we think we know a person based on one interaction or one aspect of their lives. So what do you think? What can you share with us?
That's always one of my favorite questions because, for the last 10-ish years or so, I've been back in Montana. I've been moved back to my family's farm out in Sydney in eastern Montana. And I've been really active in the farm world. But before that, I was a professional wedding photographer for 15 years. Apparently, I only like to work in the summer. Everybody else is on vacation. So, but I've lived in, all around Montana. I lived in Butte, Bozeman, have family in Billings, but also have lived in Powell, Wyoming, Bend, Oregon, and Memphis, Tennessee. So I had a big adventure before I came back, almost exactly 20 years after I left Sydney to farm.
You must be so relieved that you got that experience before you came back. Absolutely. What would you say to other people in that situation that are like aching to leave their small town or their ag life?
Mm-hmm. I was having dinner the other night, and there's a girl at high school that knows my daughter. She's now going to school in another town because of a cool opportunity she got. And you can just kind of tell like the kids that are like, oh, I cannot wait to get out of here. And I'm like, but look, you can come back. Like just a reminder that, yes, you should absolutely go experience something beyond your small town. I mean, I grew up here. I spent my entire childhood here. There were definitely days I was ready to run away. And then when I graduated, I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay home and farm. And luckily my parents were like, no, you should go to college. You should do something else. So, it's so important to remind the younger generation that you don't have to stay here. Like, go to Williston an hour away and go to college for a year. Try something and then come back. Like, if you still want to come back, great. I want everyone to come back we want our little towns to thrive. We need people to come back. But you also want those people to be able to go and have experiences, try other parts of life and decide, what to bring back. Because some of the coolest things happening in our small towns are from people who moved away, experienced something else, and they want to bring that back here.
Oh, I love that you just said that. I am so glad you just said that. I think about it all the time about the imperative of leaving. And I didn't think about it from that particular dimension. What I was thinking is you don't want people to stay and then regret or resent not exploring. But what you're saying is just as critical, which is you can bring back things that we otherwise wouldn't have experienced or wouldn't know to try.
Yep, exactly. Well, and
That's
even
brilliant.
reminding people that it's not too late. Like, your job changed, go live somewhere else for a year. I mean, what's the worst thing that happens? It doesn't work and you come back. And I think maybe because I ended up moving so much, I have zero fear of change now.
Right.
After 20
Which
years.
is so important for most people who live in the same place for their whole lives. Change is not something that they look for.
Yeah, this is the longest I've lived in one house. I'm at 5 years. So I guess Butte was a little longer. Butte was 7 years in one house. But it's funny because now I've like accumulated stuff because I'm not encouraging, and so I need to pretend I'm moving now. But it's interesting. I was even thinking today of like the high school classmates I had whose moms went back to school before the internet when it was hard to do. Because you had to like physically go at least get the books and go to class an hour away somewhere. They went in their 40s in the middle of perimenopause brain and went back to college. Like, so more impressed with them now that I'm in my 40s because I feel like that would be so hard. So those are always the people I looked up to. They were willing to take the big chance and try something else, and not just.
I love that. Yeah, my mom did it too. In her late 30s with 3 teenagers at home, she said, "I've always wanted to be a nurse." So she went back to school. It was a 2+2 program, 2 years at Pikes Peak Community College in Colorado Springs and 2 years at Colorado Health Sciences Center in Denver. And she graduated with her 4-year RN, summa cum laude, with perimenopause brain and 3 teenagers at home. Like,
yep. I'm just so impressed every day. Anyone that takes that chance, it would be. I've thought about it, and at the same time, I think I've changed careers enough now that I don't know that I need to go back to college to do it. So,
yeah, I hear you. I went back when my kids were in 4th and 6th grade to get my master's because I just wanted to keep learning, and I felt like I was things were getting a little stale. And I have a tendency to blow things up when things get stale. And I figured of all the ways to blow up my life, getting an MBA is probably a good direction to head. I also knew that getting that degree wasn't going to be especially advantageous in Montana. It's not, higher ed is not nearly as valued here in terms of the workplace as it might be in other places.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even with wedding photography in the 3 states I've lived in, it was a big change because I was in Central Oregon, a lot of big retirement community, a lot of money, and kind of found my niche there with weddings. I'd lucked out. My first job there was actually working for another photographer who is a world famous wedding photographer. So I got a bonus free education out of my job. He would go and speak at all these state conferences, national conferences, probably also like my travel bug and what attracts me to my farmers union things I do now, because that also involves traveling to new places and meeting people that do what I do in a different way. But when we moved to Tennessee, that was a completely different wedding world. Like, the Southern Bells were a thing, and my wedding packages got very expensive, but the stress level also went up with it. So it was harder for me to find my clients. My wedding clients are generally the people, they value the photography for the memory. A lot of my weddings, I was the only person hired. Like, they would do their own food. They would clean out the barn. We were out in the dirt, and it was fabulous, and I loved it. And I learned when I tweaked my prices, I would get out of that range. So I actually my prices back down so I could get the weddings I wanted to.
Oh my gosh, that totally makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was worth taking on more weddings in the summer to do the weddings that were that much fun. So at the best, I still follow a bunch of them on Facebook. So now, like, the whole set of them just had their 10th anniversary, and they all have kids now, and it's so great to watch them and see everybody grow. So,
well, you're right. That is something I wouldn't have known about you, other than every once in a while I'd see little indicators in your Instagram feed. And it was obvious from some of the pictures that you post on Instagram that this is, a professional photographer. You get angles and light that I notice. I'm like, oh, that's a really good picture.
That's my actual, after spending 3 years in Bozeman, I went to a 2-year college in Palo, Wyoming and got a degree in photographic communication. So,
oh, well, that's a great place to turn this around a little bit. You moved back to Sydney. And for our listeners, if you aren't familiar with Montana, Sydney is truly one of those middle of nowhere cities. I mean, it is how far from Billings? Is that a 4-hour drive from Billings?
Yeah, we're 4 hours from Billings. We're the big town in the middle of nowhere. There's about 6,000 people in Sydney, and I only live 5 miles out of town, so it's not too bad. I can run to town and go to Scooters, get a cup of coffee, and we have a movie theater, have the fun things. But yeah, no,
6,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for context. Right. And I know it has had some major ebbs and flows because of the oil and gas industry. But for our listeners, when I think about 6,000 people, here's where I go. When I worked for the Montana University system, this is when I worked for the state library, which is a Montana state agency. I went with the trainer, because I was a compliance officer, on site visits all across the state. And we went to Glendive. I think as far east as we went was Glendive. And we went to Hot Springs, Montana, and Belt, Montana. So Sydney is 6,000 people. That's actually a big city compared to the ones that I just mentioned. We were driving up to Conrad, Montana, which is a few hundred people. And my colleague was from that area. And I said something about Helena being a small town. Now, Helena at the time is about 28 to 30,000 people. I moved here from Washington, D.C. So I moved to this town. I mentioned Helena being a small town. And my colleague said, Sarah, your D.C. is showing. Helena's not a small town. So I just want to make sure our listeners know this. I had work. I did an all-day manager leadership training for the Sydney Health Center a few years ago. And my husband didn't want me driving by myself in January to Sydney. It is literally an 8-hour drive from the capital to Sydney. And for at least 5 of those hours, we did not see another vehicle on the road. I mean, this is
Highway 200.
Seriously isolated. So I just want to make sure that our listeners have an understanding of what we're talking about, the context here of Sydney, Montana. And it is such a cool little city. I had a great meal there. I loved the people that I experienced, and their library is second to none.
Yeah, so we are very, very lucky with what we do have here. And like you, I moved from Memphis back to Butte, which again, about 28, 30,000 people, and then back here. And, moving home there's rough parts because people have your preconceived notions from 20 years ago, who you were then, which I was a very introverted, shy, faking it till I made it kid in high school versus now. I mean, I'm still that way, but I also lost my passive aggressive gene moving away, I think. So
that's something to celebrate. So tell me, you came back, and I want to hear the story of the first time when you came back that you realized that you were glad you were back. Like, when was a moment that you were like, I am in the right place. This is right.
Well, the bonus, when I came back, it was a really slow progression. So my dad had actually not been farming for a while. He's a biochemist that happened to fall into farming because of our family. So he had gone through some things and taken some years off of farming and was working actually out in Wyoming in the oil fields. So he came back in 2009 and said, no, this is where I want to be. I want to go back to the farm too. So 2009, I'm living in Memphis. I just found out I was pregnant, and I came back for sugar beet harvest, which was the coldest, wettest, most awful year we've ever had. We were using old tractors we pulled off the hill and made run. We had a 6-row defoliator. We followed it with a 4-row digger. So there was math involved, and it was just miserable. And I'm like, this is really what we're doing. Are you sure? So then we were, and he proceeded to keep farming, and I come back every year for harvest, which at that point involved, like, the next year I flew back with a 1-year-old, or not a 1-year-old, a 4-month-old. Oh my gosh. And then the year after, a 1-year-old. And then we moved to Butte. So I would drive back, and, same thing. I was coming back for harvest. And I'm like, oh no, my kids got to experience the farm. So that was what got me. I had a daughter who I needed to raise in the same area. And I love Butte too. I still miss Butte. Butte's one of my favorite places in Montana. But the progression was I kept coming back, and I kept coming back more often. 2017, where we were here half the summer probably, just helping Dad out. 2018, we were here the whole summer. I think we went back to Butte for 2 weeks. So I went home, and I was talking to my then husband, and I was like, Dad's getting ready to retire. He's tired of doing this by himself. Either this is my chance to do it, or we're going to have to rent the farm to someone else. And he was on board. He's like, all right, we're going to do it. So 2019, moved back here. He was kind of still working in Butte. And then the progression of trying to find him a job took a while. But then, of course, we hit 2020 and COVID, and everything shut down. I was literally because I had gotten involved with Farmers Union, I was on their national policy committee that year. So in March, right when everything was ramping up, I flew to Savannah, Georgia, proceeded to get sick. I don't know if it was COVID or not, but then I sat on a stage in front of all these people, like trying not to cough and feeling the weird world shifting.
What we didn't know.
I know, right? Flew home, and I'd also been appointed to our local we have one little elementary school out here, so I've been appointed to the school board about a week before that. So my second meeting, when I had just had COVID after coming back from a vacation, or not a vacation, a work trip, basically. And we shut the schools down. So I'm like, you guys said this was like a once a month meeting thing, and we're meeting every week in masks in our gym. Like the four of us are like across the gym from each other trying to figure out what the heck is going on. So the only thing I realized is that, number one, it was a really slow progression moving back, which was probably good. Because I think if it had happened suddenly, I would have said no. I would have stayed in Butte. I was very happy there. But just the want for my daughter to be able to experience being out here was growing. And I mean, I love my dad. Hanging out with him is always fun too. So it was just cool. I mean, we live across the road from my parents out here. So it's nice. But at that point we didn't. We lived in a camper, and we lived with them. And I think that year I realized that as an essential worker in agriculture, as long as I stayed at the farm, nothing changed. Like we plugged along, we got seed, we planted, we irrigated, and we harvested like nothing was wrong, beyond the fact my daughter was at home for school. So the timing was just serendipitous, and it worked out so perfectly. And then, kind of crawling our way out of COVID holes, started getting into different groups and more active, and just finding where I belong now in my hometown versus where I felt like I belonged when I was trying to fit in really hard.
Oh, that's an interesting,
Mm-hmm.
that's an interesting part of that dynamic, the shift of your identity, kind of searching for it, thinking that you had kind of found it. But I think a lot of us go through that in our 30s, where we think we're in the place we're supposed to be. And I think it's not until we hit our late 30s, early 40s that we start to truly come back to embracing who we are, which we can do anywhere. But I think it's just part of our transformative 40s is finding that and embracing our identity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I never really, once I started doing everything else, living other places, I never thought I was going to be back here. I knew I was mobile. I knew I could go where the work was, where I needed to be. I could shift to a different career if I needed to. I had enough experience with speaking with my first job. I mean, we did short presentations in giant, multi-million-dollar photo booths and in front of crowds. And I got a lot of experience with that. But that's kind of segued into my work now with Farmers Union, where I have been super lucky to be, like I said, in charge of national policy 1 year, on that committee a couple of years, again through COVID. So shifting and being adaptable is huge. And then I was appointed as a next generation representative on our national board. So I just finished that this summer, and it was an amazing experience because you're a non-voting member on the national board, but those guys didn't treat you like any differently. Like they would ask what we thought. They would ask to expand on an idea we had. So there's 3 of them at a time, different areas. Like right now we have another one from Montana, South Dakota, and Iowa. So representing all different kinds of agriculture, from flowers to conventional egg to meat processing. So it's just a good way to get a board. You take a good example of a board that wants another perspective. You appoint younger people that may not have a voting right, but they're there, they're full members. You treat them like they're full members. And it was easily one of the best experiences I've had.
That sounds amazing. So tell me about, we did that workshop together years ago. It was probably 4 years ago. I'm guessing it was like 2022. So it would have been 3 years ago because it was after COVID.
Yep.
So it'd have to be 2022. When you think about that workshop, and what did you take away from that workshop that you're using now? I would love to hear an example, because our listeners know what I believe in terms of how stories, our personal stories, can make a huge impact, one relationship at a time. So
it segues so well into what I do now, because I think, especially with the shutdowns and the food shortages and things that happened during the pandemic, I really realized how much people don't know about where their food actually comes from. Working on issues like country of origin labeling, because right now your beef can be called country, or say it's from, a product of the USA, when it actually is a cow that came from Mexico and was cut into pieces and processed here. So there's all these things that I've learned that are, as a consumer and a parent, are huge, important issues. And it just definitely, it makes it more personal when you're trying to work with politicians, when you're trying to get the public's attention for an issue that affects, yes, agriculture, but all of us as human beings that eat food in this country. So we really honed in our women's conferences. We do similar things every year, especially. But like telling your story, like you're not just the farm wife, you're not just the ranch wife. You also have kids, and you're managing the books, and you're feeding a crew of sometimes like 15 people. Those farm wives that feed huge crews, I am so impressed and very jealous, because I have to make my own lunch. So, but no, I really especially just I took it from what I was doing the first couple of times I went to DC, and just honed that into a shorter, precise story of, like, say right now, the trade issue with the tariffs, and I grow soybeans. So hits home really fast. Telling those guys, like, you do have constituents in Montana that are raising soybeans, and we don't have a market right now. And I will full out share how much money I might lose and just make it. I mean, if you don't make it personal and real, it's not memorable, but also making it concise, so you're not saying too many things and overwhelming them. So,
my work here is done.
I know.
No, I'm kidding.
Our student.
So tell our listeners a story that you would tell our legislative folks in Washington, D.C. Tell that story.
I'm well trained, since we just did this a week ago. But I mean, my biggest issue, we kind of take turns. Everybody we bring has their specialty, so it works out great. But because I have soybeans, I got tariffs and trade. So what I would tell them generally is, right now, because we lost our market in China, which had taken our previous legislation and grain growers and soybean growers 30 to 40 years to get into. It's not not an easy market to gain. And it's a really easy market to lose, because the trust is gone, because these tariffs that have been put on in such a haphazard way have made our trading partners not trust us. So we appreciate the work that has been done getting markets like Japan, but that's a $1.2 million market, and we lost a $1.2 billion market. So basically, you took care of one state of soybean growers, the size of either Iowa, North Dakota. The rest of us still don't have a market. Something like that. Something that will hit home and just point out that, I mean, again, our state is ridiculously big. And as far as agriculture, completely diverse. Like, we have one of the most diverse agriculture areas, from, bees to lentils and chickpeas and wheat to where I'm at, because we're irrigated, the whole Yellowstone Valley back to Billings. I mean, there's still sugar beets in Billings. There's corn, soybeans. We grow a different kind of wheat because we're under irrigation than they do in the dryland areas. So it's
near me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. What's around you is definitely not what's around me. So it's even just with our state representatives, you kind of have to hit home that, yeah, people have different kinds of cows. We calve at different times of years. There's different markets for those, whether you direct market them yourself. Not enough USDA processing facilities to do that. So the issues come up really fast, and you kind of have to, I mean, we'll practice on Zoom as a group before we go. Like, get everybody figured out which part they're telling, which part of the Montana story is their part of the story. And our crew this year was so amazing. Everybody did so good. But I think it's because we have worked with you, and we know that you have to hone that story before you get there. Because otherwise, the first 4 people you talk to, you're rambling on and it doesn't make sense. And we talk to people beyond Montana. We go to places that Farmers Union doesn't have a state organization. So we were in Mitch McConnell's office, talked to his ag staffer, who was amazing. We were in another senator from, I think, Maryland, Delaware. So we kind of cover as many people as we can in a 3-day period. But the key is just, sometimes you've got 14 people in the room. Who's talking, how long, and how do we get the most impact out of a probably 15-minute visit if we're lucky. So,
yeah. Whoa.
Yeah.
This is putting things really into perspective for me in so many ways. One is what we're talking about now with the roadless areas and how they impact our environment, ecosystem, water supply. Those roadless areas are critical to the water supply.
Yeah.
So that affects ag. And then I was thinking about my experience getting to TEDx. When I first submitted an idea, it was a 3-minute video. And then I made it to the semifinals and flew to Washington, D.C. for that. And I had to hone my message down to 5 minutes. Like, and be concise, but also leave people curious. You don't want to give them all the answers, but you also don't want to leave them scratching their head. I don't understand, what's your idea, right? So breaking it down into a 5-minute pitch. And then they gave me feedback that said, that was really 2 ideas. And I was like, oh, that was 2 ideas. Oh, I have 2 TED Talks. But I had to, go down to the 1. And then they gave us 3 minutes to pitch. And I memorized it. This was the first time I semi-memorized the 5-minute one. But I really got down to that 3-minute memorized. And I was afraid that it wouldn't come across as conversational, which is the whole point of a TED, right? Is to get people engaged with it, even though they're not answering you. But it didn't. Memorizing it actually gave me a freedom, or I was almost liberated to really get into the emotion behind my words in a way that I couldn't have if I was thinking about what am I going to say next.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love this. I love that you're doing this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's from, the first time I did it, I had no idea what fly-in was. It was part of a beginning farmer thing that I had signed up for. I have a weird path into Farmers Union. I actually started at a national level and backwards tracked to now working on things locally. All through, finding an ad on Facebook, ironically.
Oh, tell us that story.
Yeah. So there was a thing that popped up for the Beginning Farmer Institute, which we still do. It's a little different now, but great program. So when I was thinking about coming back to the farm, you have to do so many hours of different kinds of training to work with the FSA as a beginning farmer. And they were going to count that.
FSA is
Farm Service Agency. Sorry. Yeah. So USDA, it's the part of the USDA that we as farmers directly work with in our counties. Any disaster things, all sorts of farm programs. We're in there multiple times a year. They probably know us as well as our bankers. So also a very super important part of.
So they're like licensing and
safety
and
some of that, some of it is just, they keep track of what you're growing, how many acres. Part of it goes back to insurance, like what your yields are. So, your average, your county average, because that's how, if different disasters hit, we'll get paid on a county average a lot of times. Just a lot of data for the government that they keep track of, which ends up benefiting us eventually in different ways. But then, so this Beginning Farmer Institute was run by National Farmers Union. I got to go to DC for this first fly-in, and then we did 2 other trips. One out to California, to the romaine capital of the world, to see how they grew romaine and strawberries organically, and all sorts of, just acquainting you with different types of farming. So yeah, my first fly-in, I was pretty clueless. Like, I didn't know anyone from my state at all. I didn't even know I was supposed to switch hotels until they were like, well, you have to check out. I was like, I have to, what? I had to switch hotels and find Montana people. And I lucked out that my first team was our now state president, his wife, and family. So I lucked out because I had a very good team behind me that first fly-in. So, but I just kind of sat back at first. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to talk about. And about our 3rd meeting on Capitol Hill, I was like, oh, I know exactly what to talk about. Because last week I was sitting in my truck combining soybeans, sitting at the elevator watching the price go down, because it was the same thing. It was the same year that the tariffs happened last time. So I suddenly had a story, and I didn't know how to tell it. But in my head, I kind of ran through while everybody was talking. So I started going last. And then, because I had Walter and Cindy and everybody there, they were so good at pushing me, like, hey, Sarah, why don't you tell them about your soybeans? So I had a good backup system, had support to find my story as we went through the 2 days, and then to tell it. So again, having somebody kind of guide you through that when you're new is huge. And that would have been 2018, I think, was my first one. So,
wow.
Yeah, it seems like a really big whirlwind of things I've lucked into, or found that I made my way into, because I knew that was the direction that, I love farming and I like being here, but I love going and telling people about farming and talking about what it's like to live in a small town, and worrying about, like, is my hospital gonna make all these cuts? Is my favorite restaurant gonna stay open? Are enough people going? My favorite coffee shop just closed, but there's 3 other favorite coffee shops, so it's okay. But it's like the realities of living in a small area are very different. So it's different issues that you get to pull in. And being on a small school board, we're always there at the same time as the school board association is. So I get to say hi to people that I email with in Helena, because they help us on our school board too. But it's further proof that Montana is a big, small town, and people all over. And those people are always there to help you out, help you hone your skills, and keep telling your version of your story in different situations.
Yeah, for our listeners, some people describe Montana as a small town with a very long main street.
Exactly.
So when you think about your experiences, I told you about Sarah, your DC is showing. Have you had a time where you met somebody that has never been to a place like this, or met somebody like you, that you can talk about? What was that experience like?
For the most part, I think people travel more than they did when I was a kid, but there are definitely people here that don't go beyond maybe going to Walmart in Williston, or their one vacation every year is the NFR in Vegas, which is great. They love it. They love going, and that's their thing. Versus if I'm here too long, I can tell I get the itch and I want to go do something else. So, but it definitely has been, for the most part, it's been pretty positive. People are always open to hearing different perspectives. I have a couple of my older neighbors that I will spar with politically all day long, and it's fun. Like, we probably won't ever agree on a lot of the things, but we like trying to figure out where we have common ground, I think. Which, again, you're talking about agriculture issues, healthcare in small towns. There's overlap for the most part. Nobody wants to see schools close, hospitals close. We want what we have to stay, and it needs enough people did, like you said, stay here and want to live here to keep everything going. And we're lucky because we're the bigger town. We have the hospital here, we have nursing home, we have grocery stores. It's harder when you get out into the smaller areas, and trying to keep those places going. But I think that's another post-COVID thing. A lot of younger people kind of are craving that open space and are trying to figure out. I mean, there's people that have moved here for various jobs, either oil field related or at the hospital, something from out of town, and they love it and they stay. They buy a little place out of town. They have a few acres. They get chickens. They get addicted to the rural lifestyle. And you learn that, being really far away from a Starbucks isn't a big deal when you have something else that is just as good. Your neighbors are great and they make an okay cup of coffee. So it's an okay trade-off.
I describe Montana as the kind of place where people move here and either they send roots into the ground and realize they belong here, or Montana chews them up and spits them out. Because you have to have some grit to stay here, especially in those small towns, But even here in Helena, there's aspects of living in a city where we plow the roads as best we can. But when it's negative 12 degrees for 6 days in a row, we get 30 inches of snow. Our city can't really keep up with that. And we don't budget for that kind of snowfall. And where are we going to put all that snow? And so some people just realize that this is not the place for them. And I love that you have these relationships that people get to experience somebody who's local. You can be a voice for both. Yeah. You are an ambassador in such a variety of ways. And I think we all have that potential.
Yeah, it's funny because I always say I've lived in all the cities that have self-esteem problems. Memphis, definitely, because everyone asks me from Nashville and Knoxville, but realistically, I like Memphis way better. It's that, like you said, the gritty thing. It's probably from growing up here. I don't know, but it has its issues, but it also has the most vibrant food, music. The history in general is just incredible. Getting to live there was so amazing because it's also the biggest place I've ever lived. So I had the big city experience there. Living in Butte, I love Butte, but I had avoided Butte most of my life because we were football rivals, so I heard all sorts of terrible rumors. My only impression was like the gas stations on the interstate, so it wasn't. So when we moved back, that was where my ex-husband now could get a job. So that's where we moved. And it ended up being fantastic because he had family in Helena, I had family in Billings. So we were close, relatively, Montana-wise. An hour's really close. That's like no big deal. 3 hours, no big deal. It was really fun to get to kind of explore the rest of Western Montana. Because when I was in Bozeman, I was in college. You don't really get to do as much as you would like to. So as an adult, I got to do the hikes and we went to Homestake Lodge and cross-country skied like every Wednesday as a group of moms for a while with my daughters.
That's awesome.
Like the full mountain experience. So, but same thing with Butte. Butte, I think is getting over a little of it, but had the, self-esteem for the locals that hadn't left were like, it's Butte. I'm like, your city is amazing. The history, the people, everything is just, what town are you going to celebrate St. Patrick's Day and Chinese New Year like back to back, and they're both a huge deal. Like everybody comes. So
for our listeners, our St. Patrick's Day parade and celebration in Butte, Montana is one of the biggest, especially by Montana standards. But we used to boast the most ancestrally in Irish towns in the country.
Yeah, it's still up there. It's
still up there. Yeah.
There's still a lot of Irish people.
Yeah. And I think what I love about living here, I've been here 26 years now, more than half my life, or about half my life. And I think about how diverse Montana is. When we talk about diversity, and even though skin tone is not especially diverse in Montana, lacking in significant ways. But when people think of Montana, when they meet me, they think of this eccentric, oh, you're from Montana. It seems eccentric to them. But I talked to Kev Ham, who ran for national office this last round of elections, didn't make it to the primary. But he said something that really struck me. And that is, we don't have to drive very far to experience significantly different culture in Montana. So I could drive even to the Blackfoot Reservation or the SKC Reservation, and that's only a couple hours drive. I don't have to go to Europe to experience significantly different culture. And I could go to farmland not far from us. We could go either to Hamilton and Darby going west, or we could go to the east to Sydney and Billings and Laurel and all that area. All of that is ag. I could go less than 100 miles west and slightly north of us to Houndville and see Colmannix's ranch. And those little towns are a completely different culture than what I experience right here in Helena.
Yep. Yeah. And that's just it. You've got the diversity of the types of agriculture, the diversity of the types of people. We all got here in different ways. Like half my family's Danish. And they settled just outside of Sydney in a dryland area. And then the other half is Norwegians from North Dakota. They had a dairy. Like it was, they all got here looking for something better. And I'm now the 4th generation in on both sides of my family, and kind of melding the experiences we've had with ups and downs, and one brother buying out another brother and then figuring out how to come back anyway. And it's an interesting place to still end up here after I thought I had left and was gone and moving on with my life. And then I still got to come back, and I'm still so excited about, if it ever stops raining, I'm going to go combine some soybeans and get in my combine and drive. And again, being a woman in agriculture, everyone's like, you drive combines and semis. I'm like, that is my favorite part. I love driving.
I love big equipment.
Oh, it's so much fun. And I mean, for like an hour, then it feels like work. But, I've got Bluetooth radios. I could listen to podcasts. But yeah, I do fairly frequently think of like how we all got here and how, who would stop in the middle of the Badlands in North Dakota or Montana? There's a reason they called it the Badlands. And the water and the groundwater is not great. And then they figured out how to irrigate out of the river and work as a group in a community to put in this whole system that we use today to grow the things that they grow in the Midwest. So watching different markets come and go. Obviously, Sydney, we lost our sugar beet factory a few years ago, which was devastating. That was our cash crop. That was our local market. So watching the Valley pivot has been, it's interesting, a little disheartening, but I think we're kind of finding our way. I didn't necessarily come back here to be a corn and soybean grower, but again, because of my friends now in Farmers Union who live in the Midwest, everybody does that, and figuring out, okay, well, corn and soybeans will pay for the farm stuff. Where are my side projects? Like I still have my little acre of hops that my farm is named after. I don't do as much with them anymore as I used to with the breweries because I'm further away from Western Montana. But so what's my next side project? Like we've talked about growing potatoes. We grow a lot of sweet corn that we sell locally. About expanding that possibly. Everyone I talk to on the Highline cannot get fresh sweet corn. I'm like, okay, well, do I find a refrigerated truck and grow enough that I sell it along the Highline? Maybe. So there's always that's the bonus. You have the soil and you have the access to the land, and you just need to find the new opportunities and things that are missing. So. Wow.
It's inspiring, exciting, and terrifying all at the same time.
Farming is terrifying in general. Nobody would farm if you weren't a ridiculously crazy optimist, because we don't know anything. We plant in the spring. We don't get any say in how much all that costs. We have no idea how much we're getting paid in the fall. Like when we planted in the spring, it was looking okay. The prices this fall now are not stellar. So, will be okay, but there aren't people that are not going to be so lucky either. So, and you don't ever want to be that generation that loses the farm. So
Oof.
it's the farm stress is definitely going to come into play here.
Well, I have to say, speaking to the women, the Montana Farmers Union Women's Conference, speaking there and meeting the people, the women that are doing this work was one of the most inspiring and interesting groups that I've met in all of my career of working with the public. Because I put about 20 years into the public sector. I worked with libraries, I worked with the university system, but working with women in agriculture is such a different experience. And man, these women are badass. Carissa McNamara, wow. That woman, just wow.
Yeah. And that's just it. I think, I mean, it's a tough, resilient bunch because we have to be. There's just a lot of things out of our control. So you learn to adapt and you do the best thing you can come up with and keep moving forward.
Absolutely. Sarah, this has been such a pleasure. I'm so glad we got to reconnect after these years.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, listeners, it's your turn. Sarah and I spoke for nearly an hour about what it's like to explore our identities through our youth and then maybe come back home and find out what life is like, what our identities, how our identities can be shaped by our environments and by the things that we think are important. We talked about what it's like to travel and tell people your story so that they uncover their own stories and so that they can understand truly what the rest of the world could look like. It was full of inspiration and ideas. And now I want to know, what will you do with this? What was one thing that stood out in this conversation? I'd love to hear from you. Don't hesitate to write me an email or comment wherever you see this episode shared. Check out the show notes so that you can follow Sarah on her Instagram page at elkinsconsulting.com. Thanks for listening.
That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.